Today on Crunch Week, we're talking about Aereo losing its battle at the Supreme Court, GoPro heating up the IPO market for summer, and all the news out of Google I/O. Hey there, I'm Colleen.
I'm Ryan.
And I'm Alex.
And big week for tech news. Started off on a sad note for a startup, Aereo.
Yeah, Aereo, their case was basically struck down in the Supreme Court in a decision that was 6-3, so it's not even like it was really that close. The Supreme Court basically decided that Aereo was illegal because it looked too much like a cable service that wasn't actually paying for content.
Now, really quickly, for anyone who doesn't know, what's Aereo and why is it so controversial?
So Aereo is a technology company, and basically what they've been doing is they have these little tiny satellite, I guess, you know,
antennas.
Antennas. They're antennas.
It's Friday.
No satellite, just antennas. Okay.
Yeah. So they have these little tiny. Can we cut that? So we have these little tiny antennas that are taking in free over-the-air broadcast from broadcast networks, and then they're selling access to that service to consumers. So they're not paying for the signal, but they're basically.
The signal is free, but the Supreme Court held they were in violation of the Copyright Act.
Yeah, so basically the argument is if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, then it must be a duck. And so the Supreme Court basically said, well, if Aereo is selling content like a cable company, then it should also pay the broadcasters for access to that content like a cable company.
Did you read the dissent?
I did not.
It's blistering. So Scalia, a very controversial Supreme Court justice in general, held that the majority opinion was, I think the rough surmise would be crap. He said that just because it walks and docks like a duck doesn't mean it's a duck at all, and that the majority decision could actually lead to other forms of online content companies like cloud companies kind of falling under the purview that they just made up to indict Aereo in this way, or Aereo in this way. If you haven't had a chance, I'd really take a look at it. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's interesting how when these rulings come out about technology, it's the justices that maybe historically you haven't really liked them that much that actually seem to be the most forward-thinking, and then other people surprise you with being against.
Wait, so then how long until Scalia works for Google Ventures?
Stay tuned. It could happen.
Next week on Crunch Week.
His retirement plan. People don't usually retire from the Supreme Court, but
that's a hell of a pension he's got right there.
It could happen.
Hey, Kevin.
But yeah, who are the big losers here? I mean, Aereo especially, obviously, but they had about $100 million in venture capital invested.
Yeah, and they basically have said, like all along, they have no plan B. Like they don't know what they're going to do next. And the CEO has come out and said, he doesn't want to be in the business of, aggregating content, paying for it, and then reselling it like the cable companies. So it's not really clear what their next step is, but it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, Barry Diller, one of their big investors, kind of just was like, all right. And that's a really bold thing to say after putting that much money into a company. I think it was $97 million. I mean, this was a well-capitalized, popular service with a lot of subscribers that just got slapped.
Yeah.
When the Supreme Court says no, that's usually the buck kind of stops there, usually.
Until we go back and retry it.
Yeah.
Or not.
We'll see. But it's interesting. I think we're going to have a lot more of these kind of things in the years ahead. There are a lot of technology companies that are really in a gray area when it comes to regulation. So
Uber, Lyft,
all of these throat clearing.
Airbnb. I've heard of that. That's pretty big these days.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see. Okay, next big news. GoPro IPO went really well.
Yes, fantastically well. I had doubts. I had firm doubts about their IPO, and investors had the other opinion.
Yeah.
They're up by last check about 50% over a 2-day period. They're only 2 days that have been public, and they've just done massively well. I mean, they were up 30% yesterday, another 16% today or something like that. It's just been stellar for them.
Any idea why it's been received so well?
Well, I think there's a real, panache of cool attached to GoPro, and they are GAAP profitable, which is rare for technology offerings these days. But at the same time, they had negative growth on both their revenue and net income in their first quarter of this year, and to me, that's kind of a red flag. But investors, I think, are betting that their transition to a media company down the road will be profitable. But the company said in its S1 that it expects no material revenue from its media business in 2014.
So basically, it plans on it's been a hardware company all its life, and now it plans on giving access to the videos that are shot on
I think it wants to aggregate the best content from the cameras that it sells, and then probably repackage that and sell it to cable channels or Xbox or YouTube, and then derive ads revenue off that. But there's gonna be a lot of copyright work there, and sharing revenue with their producers and their just average consumers and so forth. But I think the main bet here, if you're buying the stock, is that they're gonna sell more cameras next quarter. I mean, that's the bet they're making. Go for it. Have fun. I can't wait to see the first quarter's earnings.
Do we have any idea like what their product roadmap is? Is the next gen camera like on its way?
I have absolutely no idea.
Okay.
It's hardware. Who knows about hardware?
I haven't read the dissent either for Aereo.
Everyone's guilty and everyone's fired.
We don't know anything.
I think that this is a really good sign, though, that GoPro is state independent and they did the IPO. Their CEO is kind of an interesting, independent guy.
Woodman,
so
right?
often, Woodman, Nicholas Woodman, and so often with companies like this, you see them get acquired, and by a hardware company, like by a Cisco or something. Remember when they were acquiring cameras, or a Google,
Yeah,
or
Cisco
anything?
acquired Flip, and then
Flip.
2 years later shut it down. Just
Right.
completely
It never
shut it
made
down.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
so
like
it's-
Microsoft buying Tesla. Ugh.
Right. So I don't know. There have been a lot of rumors, though, that GoPro has been courted by people right up until the last day of the IPO. We had been hearing at TechCrunch, some rumors that they had some big acquisition offers, and they decided to roll the dice and go for the IPO and stay independent. So it's good to see.
And they rocked it. I mean, there's been a number of good IPOs recently. Arista Networks had a big debut. Mobile Iron did well, even though it loses boatloads of money. GoPro. We have Alibaba coming up on the NICE, not the NASDAQ. And somewhere in the wings, maybe way back in the wings, there's Aaron Levy and Box, but we're not quite sure when they're going to step forward yet.
Yeah, people have been saying that this could mean that the IPO market is heating up and it's friendly to technology companies once again.
I just feel sorry for Box, because anytime anything happens in the public markets, we talk about Box. Like, IPO does well, Box. Does well or does badly, Box. Box, Box, Box. I just can't wait to see their updated S1. I'm so excited.
And it's so funny, because what does Box have to do with GoPro? Like, these are totally different companies, but they're all in the technology space.
Well, GoPro has, GAAP profits, and Box lost 9 figures last year.
So, yeah,
Similarity.
natural connections there. But big conference this week, Google I/O, the developer conference. So it's not, normally a big news press thing, or you shouldn't expect it to be, but often it actually is. And
Well, it's
so this
kind of. I was going to say it's kind of interesting. Both Google and Apple with WWDC. Previously in previous years, these had been. They've used these as platforms to announce new products, to not just announce sort of the new features in those products, but to actually like come out and say, oh, we've got new Macs coming out, or we've got new Chromebooks that we're going to announce. And neither one of them did that this time around. It was basically just like all about the developers. It was all about sort of the stuff that happens behind the scenes.
Yeah. So the big news from it, I guess, was the fact that everyone was wearing a smartwatch, and that Google Android Wear is the name of the software platform that is going to be for smartwatches and wearable devices like that. So they kind of really focused on that, and not once, especially in the opening day keynote, did they mention Google Plus or Google Glass.
Yeah. I miss the days when Glass was thrown out of like a blimp and they like ran on bikes and then did tumbles and then ran on stage. That was a developer conference.
Yeah, that was last year. That was the last thing that everyone saw, and we were kind of blown away. Oh my gosh, there was this huge thing. And then this year, the last thing that we saw was a bunch of like cloud architecture thing that went on for like 45 minutes that like only about half the audience understood, but we all had to sort of sit there.
But their one last thing was cardboard, which is
cool.
incredible.
Yeah. So explain cardboard. This you should all check out on TechCrunch. We have a lot of great coverage of the stuff that came out at Google I/O, but the thing that's undoubtedly had the most video views, at least, is our colleague Greg Komparek's hands-on with cardboard.
It's a cardboard-based VR headset. You basically like rip this thing open and fold it, and then it makes like a little Oculus Rift out of your phone.
A Moculus Thrift.
A Moculus Thrift, yeah.
Jokes for days.
That's so good.
That's the good one, yeah.
And it works.
And it works. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, definitely a backhanded swipe at Facebook for sure. That just paid $2 billion
for Oculus.
Yeah. So kind of a clever, kind of a geeky, clever, fun thing.
I thought it was cool until I used it, and then I saw how awesome it was to fly around in Google Earth, and I was actually just incredibly impressed. Like, the experience itself isn't just like, oh, this is kind of cool. It was like, I'm going to be in here for like 5 minutes. Just let me be. You're just flying around cities. It's just, it's awesome.
It's pretty cool. I was going to say the other thing about Google I/O was just like getting Android on every screen. You know, we talked about the wearables, we talked about Android Wear, but they're also on autos and Android TV. They're trying to do TV again, and all sorts of crazy shit.
Yeah, it seemed to me like Google is maybe focusing on what has worked so far. They've thrown a lot of things against the wall in recent years with Google Plus and Google Glass and these different brands, but the Android brand has been pretty successful out of all the other things that they've had. So maybe they're just investing more and saying, okay, we're going to call it Android, we're going to make it an Android thing.
So Google TV, is that dead?
Google TV is dead, and now it's Android TV.
Okay, is that gonna work, do we think?
It's going to be on TVs coming this fall.
Okay.
Yeah. There's going to be an entire line of, like, all the Sony smart TVs are going to be powered by Android TV, as opposed to Sony having to build and distribute their own operating system on smart TVs. So from that perspective, I think it could actually work.
Okay.
And it looks like the technology is actually pretty cool. And unlike Google TV, it'll work with pretty much a whole bunch of chipsets, and it will also have all the same like Android components for developers that they're already used to. So it's not like they'll have to learn like a new OS to write for the TV.
That's smart.
Yep.
Anyway, thanks for
now that
tuning
we've
in.
bored you.
Ryan!
Technology, always interesting news. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.